Chicago's broke and Aaron Chalk's in the clear. We talk about it next on Capitol View. Welcome to Capitol View, the weekly program on state politics and government and how it might just affect you. Joining me this week on Capitol View is Jerry Nowicki, reporter for Capital News, Illinois. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also Professor Emeritus of Political Science from the University of Illinois Springfield, Kent Redfield.
Good to be here.
Let's start out with a topic that is a bit far afield, perhaps geographically, from where we're broadcasting at in central Illinois, and that is the city of Chicago. It's got some pretty severe financial problems. It's had financial problems for a long time, but the mayor recently, Lori Lightford, has said some things that are pretty, I think, controversial in some centers, and folks are looking at the city of Chicago. How are they going to deal with this? Jerry, bring us up to speed, could you?
Yeah, I think they have somewhere near $800 million in pension liabilities. There's been some discussion of including the state in paying those off, or coming to the state to pay those off in some proportion, rather. I don't think it's going to be politically popular by any means. I don't know if it's all that realistic, and nothing of that sort could happen until possibly a graduated income tax passes anyway, and that's on the 2020 ballot.
Sure. I mean, this isn't necessarily brand new. I mean, Chicago has come to Springfield before. Is this any different from what we've seen in the past, and if so, why?
Chicago is just like any other municipality. You know, they would like to get more benefit out of the state. Mm-hmm. It's the biggest kid on the block, and that always makes an impact. And so it's got the fact that it has huge financial problems in addition to, their pensions. They're just, their revenue streams are very poor. They're tapped out in terms of property tax. I mean, they've got some really high property taxes, and so, they're looking at a variety of ways to get their deficit down. You've got a new mayor that wants to do things, and that usually involves spending money, and so, in a sense, it's not dissimilar from what's going on at the state with a new governor who wants to do more spending, but is also trying to figure out, how do I make the expenditures and the revenue match up, particularly since we're in the hole, and so, but you cannot do things for Chicago independent of doing things for, other municipalities, and so she's got some really difficult things to deal with. It also, highlights again the problems that Illinois' history in terms of dealing with pensions, in this case municipal pensions, cause, and the state has a huge unfunded liability in terms of, in the billions of dollars in terms of its pension. So this is not, this is not anything new, but it is a new cast of characters, a new governor, a new mayor. Chicago is a huge factor in Illinois politics in general. It is a huge factor in elections, and so, what happens in Chicago has a dramatic impact on the rest of Illinois politics.
Well, and Pritzker's predecessor, Bruce Rushton, was fairly infamous for saying, no, not going to bail out Chicago, or that was a stance he took. Now that we've got a Chicagoan who's a Democrat, any chance that things are going to work out any differently based on parties alone?
Yeah, well, Governor Rauner, he took to calling anything that he didn't like a Chicago bailout, no matter whether it was or wasn't. But it's going to come down if the state's going to find a way to get more revenue. Chicago's going to find a way to get more revenue. It could be property taxes for Chicago, that is, and then if the graduated income tax doesn't pass, and they're counting on it for $3.5 billion. They're going to find a way to get that revenue through either a flat tax or something else. I don't know if it's going to help Chicago's case.
I think one thing the mayor said that has gotten a lot of attention, and perhaps rightfully so, to the Ed Board, I believe, of the Sun-Times. She said, we just can't keep taxing rich people like this. It's not going to work. and this was, I think, with regard to questions about can we increase property taxes, for example, for the city to bail itself out. That seems a fairly bold statement, I think, or an interesting statement, given the looming vote on a progressive income tax. Should we be surprised that she said that, and is she trying to send any kind of a signal?
Well, it's again, with a new person, you really don't know. You don't have, after 20 years of Richard J. Daley, people knew Daley speak.
Sure.
and what things meant and didn't mean. And so she's finding her way. She's in a very tough situation, absolutely, with a lot of progressive ideas that cost money that she'd like to get involved with. I mean, if we get the graduated income tax, that's going to mean more money for schools. That will help Chicago. Won't help Chicago's budget directly, but it will relieve some of the pressure that's going on. And so they, as a home rule municipality, they have lots of options. The city of Springfield, they levy a property tax and they put that into pensions. They fund the rest of city government out of a whole bunch of other fees, licensings. If you're a home rule municipality, you've got lots of options in terms of how what you tax, how do you do fees and stuff. So she certainly can get creative, but it is those are staggering numbers. Yep. It's not clear how you can do it without.
You're kissing $1 billion almost.
And you're cutting services and raising taxes, and that's not the best position ever to be in politically.
Yeah. How hard might it be for her to balance, because you're right, the municipalities do have a lot of options in what they can tax. Can she get out of this mess, or get at least enough out of it, without cutting support for a progressive income tax that you expect would be perhaps more popular in an urban area like Chicago than elsewhere?
Yeah, I don't know if she'll. I think whatever she does, whatever she decides to do, will be kind of separate from the graduated income tax. But people might be less reticent, or might be more reticent to put their vote on anything that says tax if they're already seeing their property tax bills grow. Yeah.
I mean, we've seen how popular the soda pop tax was in Chicago. I mean, something that was fairly minuscule causes a huge uproar, while other more substantial things might run under the radar. Speaking of broke, we have, well, I don't know whether he's broke or not, but after a long legal saga, former U.S. Representative Aaron Schock is now out of the legal woods. This week, the final deal was closed, and he no longer is facing any kind of charges whatsoever. He's as innocent as anybody ever was who walked the planet. As folks will remember, he got into trouble, 3-4 years ago now?
Roughly.
Accused of using campaign funds, and in some cases public funds, for personal gain. I mean, I'll ask you, Professor, I mean, 3-4 years ago when this began, did you ever think we'd be sitting here now talking about it the way we are?
No, I thought it was I assumed that when you're talking about things like double charging your campaign fund and the U.S. government for mileage for your car, that looks like fraud, and it looks like something that it's kind of difficult to do as an oops.
Yeah, he had some sort of magic car that could do like 600,000 miles a year or something. I don't recall the details, but yeah.
And so it does not seem to have been a very well run prosecution. Correct. In terms of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And so he has essentially said, of the things that he were accused of that there were part of a felony indictment, he has agreed to pay some money back, said, I did this, but it was a mistake. Yep. I mean, he isn't saying he didn't do the things that they were alleging when they brought forth an indictment. It's just that he's not, he's not pled guilty to anything.
Correct.
He's agreed, I did this, but apparently they weren't crimes.
Oversight, mistake, oops,
right.
as you say. I mean, Jerry, what do you think? I mean, if Aaron Schock knew then what he knows now, would he have resigned? Should he have resigned?
It seems like that the fact that he resigned kind of led them or helped him along in the scenario, and that he still wasn't in government. But he's got to repay the $68,000. He said he has $4 million in attorney legal fees.
Sure, I'll bet he does.
And I think the $68,000 is the campaign, and then there's another undisclosed amount that he's got to repay the IRS.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like he's getting off scot-free. His reputation might take a hit, but his legal his legal record is clear. So he's going to be paying back that money for a long time.
And this was a person that was a superstar
Absolutely.
in terms of up and coming, was very popular in terms of, other Republican representatives wanted him to come to their fundraisers.
Oh, yeah.
They would highlight him. And
He was the boy wonder. I
yeah,
mean, he was,
and now he certainly is going to be looking for a way to put his talents to use to earn some money. Now, I don't, hopefully he's not going to end up on Dancing with the Stars, but he might. But you could certainly see, there might be a cable news network out there that's looking for a bright, good-looking commentator that with a Republican slant on things. So
Rick Santorum has landed well.
Yeah, so it will be interesting to see where he goes.
If there was a book produced, say, The Secret Life of Aaron Schock, The Inside Look at the Capitol, would you buy it? After all he's been through?
Yeah,
I mean,
Kent's got access to a pretty strong library at UAS.
I might. Yeah, I might check it out. But yeah, I mean, no, it will be. If someone decides to write about it, it would be an interesting story. But it's more likely that it's going to end up in magazine and newspaper articles rather than. I don't think that it's going to rival some of the other things that we've seen over the last couple of years as far as a bestseller, but you never know.
is he on the Donald Trump short list for some position at the White House? What might it be? I mean, stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so good luck to Mr. Schock. I mean, we know that in the past, he started out as, I think, the youngest school board member pretty much ever, and then became one of the youngest legislators ever. His political future probably is not that bright, but he's always shown a talent, I think. Real estate, I believe he did fairly well in. I believe he's in California now, to some extent. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't write off a political career. You never know.
Yeah, you never do know. Well, speaking of political careers, one is ending and one might be entering a new phase, so to speak. John Shimkus, who promised he wouldn't serve more than 2 terms, was that 1995, now is saying that he will retire. What are we to make of this one? I mean, he's been in Congress for forever. It's a fairly safe Republican district, but some Republicans have kind of taken a look at it and said, now is not the right time. I think Chapin Rose would be one good example of that. How coveted of a spot is this, given that we're facing some redistricting coming up pretty quickly?
It's a very Republican district.
Yep.
Being incumbent is almost always a good thing, and so whoever wins this district will have a leg up on what happens when you get to redistricting. The reality is that if Illinois loses a congressional district, it undoubtedly will, it may lose 2, the one that almost certainly is going to come out of Southern Illinois. And so you can imagine whoever wins is this the 16th district?
15th, I believe.
Yeah. But so Shimkus's district, Rodney Davis's district, LaHood's district,
right.
Boss's district. I mean, if you make those 4 districts into 3 districts, then you've got at least 2 incumbents running against each other, and creative Democratic map makers might figure out a way to draw a district that was the home of 3 current Republican congressmen. So when the opportunity comes up, the primary is the election. No Democrat is going to win from this.
Yeah, well, I mean, in that district for sure. I mean, if we talk about Davis's district for a second, I mean, that was pretty close last time around, and it's perceived that it's going to be close again. And so, Bost, I think, is probably he's done very well as has LaHood, and so you would, I think, perhaps enter a little bit with a lag if you haven't been in office for as long as some of these other ones have. The other recent announcement is Representative David McSweeney from Barrington Heights has today announced that he's not going to be running for election. Should we be surprised by this? Why would you announce? I mean, he said that he wants to run for a statewide office. Why say what he said today at this point in time?
He's on the outs with the Republican House caucus anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think they allow him to take part in caucuses. They've taken away his communications staff.
Correct.
And the platform that he has as a representative is not going to go away because he has a pretty large social media following.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be on Twitter. He's going to be saying the same thing he's always said. He just won't be the member of a super minority caucus that probably doesn't have too much say, and which he doesn't have much say within.
Sure.
So,
I mean,
it's a reasonable calculation in terms of, if I can be the foil to the House Republican leader for the next 2 years, but we're going to constantly get, your brains beat out by the Democratic majority for the next 2 years, and so he does get recognition. He does position himself as being the representative of, the more pure. Conservative, Trump-supporting kind of Republican approach, but it's probably, but he may be able to actually be less constrained by not being a legislator. You don't have to do constituent service.
Correct.
You don't have to raise money in terms of running for election, those sorts of things and stuff. And so, he obviously has progressive ambition, and this is a calculated, move that he can better position himself for, particularly a statewide audience, by being essentially a free agent and not being encumbered by having to, represent a district in the General Assembly.
He has made it clear, at least that's what he's been saying, is statewide. First off, let's take the first possibility. He's talked about Duckworth. Does a Republican of that stripe have a reasonable shot? What do you think, Jerry?
I think it's going to be difficult. Illinois has been bluer than
blue on blue,
as blue as it's been probably ever in the most recent elections. So it'll be a difficult, but someone with a social media following like his could just pull it off if there's apathy in the Democratic Party in 2022.
2022 is a long ways away, of course. He's also talked about Jesse White becoming Secretary of State. Is it a similar uphill climb, or is a dynamic about that that's different at all?
Yeah, Jesse White would be 89 at that time, so whoever his successor is, or who knows.
He may never leave. Even.
Congressional districts, there are going to be some that are more favorable to Republicans than others, but the Democrats will draw the map. Statewide elections are very problematic for Republicans, given the way the demographics have been trending. And so, while you can't gerrymander a U.S. Senate district, it is what it is, and it is very difficult but not impossible, to win a statewide election as a Republican. And so, building a congressional district might be a better, depending on how they shape the districts in the suburbs, because that's where the downstate is more Republican, the suburbs have become more Democratic. And
I mean, I haven't frankly heard any real serious names yet thrown out against Jesse White or Duckworth. It's so early. Folks are
and I would be surprised if Jesse White runs again, although he's said that he's not running, and he's
said that
changed
before.
His mind a number of times. But there are a lot of people that have been have been waiting for Jesse to retire that now have gone on to do other things.
And retire themselves.
Have retired themselves. And so, maybe we'll believe it when we see it.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about sin, because that seems to be the end thing in Illinois, at least in the state capital. We balance our budgets with cannabis and gambling and things that folks might not necessarily consider as being on the straight and narrow, or things that we should be doing in church. I'm speaking now of Arlington Park. This is the big racetrack in the Chicago area. It's announced this week. It's owned by Churchill Downs. As viewers might recall, the legislature passed a bill, signed into law by the governor, which allows for casino gaming, mainly slots, to go into racetracks. And Arlington Park has said, not sure we want to do that. In fact, we might just close. Jerry, why would they suggest doing something like that?
It seems that they want a more favorable deal out of it. I don't think the racetrack video gaming would be as profitable as casinos video gaming, if I'm understanding it correctly. But yeah, I don't. There's going to be trailer bills,
Sure.
more legislation about cannabis and about gambling, and I think they're probably. My instinct would tell me they're getting in the best position for veto session or next session to advocate for more money.
Yeah, and we should have mentioned, in terms of talking about City of Chicago, is one of the ways the City of Chicago wants to make money is with the Chicago Casino.
Yeah.
That is now in question in terms of the way the bill is structured,
Yeah.
how much taxes are out of it.
Yeah.
And so if you open the gambling bill to deal with the Chicago Casino, that opens the gambling bill for other things. And
Sure.
so part of this may be anticipating that you are going to open the gambling bill, and then in order to be successful in terms of making change one place, that opens opportunities other places. And so that could be a very interesting component of the veto session, is what we're going to do with gambling.
Yeah, because the consultant's report that's come out recently in the last month or so just made it pretty clear that a Chicago casino at the tax rates spelled out in the legislation just doesn't pencil out, particularly if you don't put it downtown. And so I think there is some question about, are we going to lower that tax rate? And it will be reopened perhaps. And what is kind of, I think they tipped their hand a little bit maybe when the track said, because part of the thing is you get casino style gaming, which is slots. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of blackjack being played there, I would think. But a percentage of the take from the casino gaming has to go for purses. And that was something that they drew out. Is it that much of a quid pro quo because the same company owns a casino not that far away? Is there anything that could make these folks happy?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. I don't know what it is, but they got their eye on something.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it's a carve out. So something. Can you do something just for us and maybe not for anybody else? I mean, part of it too is that the casinos, the tracks, I believe, get 4 betting positions for sport betting. So they would get, I think, potentially more places to collect money from gamblers and other places might be. Is that any kind of an advantage, do you think? How big is sports betting really going to be?
Well, then, the initial budget assumes, that this is a big deal, and that there's a ton of money out there, and that we're going to be able to figure out how to tap into that market. And so, that could be, sports betting could turn out to be the real prize in this. On the other hand, it could be so oversaturated and with everybody in it, and all of the other states, and we may not be able to figure out how to price things. Again, we're assuming, just like with marijuana, we're assuming that we can figure this out to get the best kind of relationships and make a market work, and without any kind of track record. They're going to say, well, this is how 16 other states have done it successfully. Sure. No, we have no idea.
I have no idea. I mean, it's interesting, I think, in a sense that with gambling, they've expanded it, and right now, most of the casinos, my understanding, aren't even using all the positions that they're allowed under the law, and yet they're being granted more positions. With cannabis, and here's the segue, it strictly limits the number of outlets that are going to be able to sell marijuana. And recently, we've seen a number of municipalities opt out. It's legal unless you opt out, and we've seen, I think, at least 4 or 5. Most recent one being Naperville, saying we are not going to be allowing cannabis sales in the city. This is some consternation to the existing medical marijuana dispensary. Is that going to get fixed, Jerry? I mean, does something need to get fixed?
Yeah, Naperville, I think they left open a window to where they'd let the voters decide in
Sure.
a future referendum.
Right.
But their medical dispensary there would be getting a raw deal because they
paid a lot for a
They
license.
could still sell cannabis,
Right.
just not recreational cannabis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, most of the towns denying it are smaller towns that wouldn't be chosen for.
You mean you can't buy marijuana in Morton? Darn.
Just the smaller towns that you wouldn't choose for a dispensary
And-
anyway. I think there's
Correct.
only going to be 55 licenses. So.
And
Yeah.
there's a tension between limiting the licenses, which means that you're maximizing the license fees,
Right.
which is important for balancing the state budget over
Sure.
the next couple of years.
Yeah.
But then you have to transition into how do we structure a market that maximizes the revenue.
Right.
And it may very well be that we need a lot more places selling, but you're starting off with a small number that have paid a lot to be able to do this.
And at least one is being told no.
Yeah, so this is, again, it's the how do you make this work when you're kind of inventing it as you go along. And it's not necessarily the best, gives you the 100% confidence that everything that we said we were going to do to fix the state budget is going to work.
Correct. Yeah.
That would be a shock if it did, and this is an area where I think there's a lot of uncertainty.
Correct.
Yeah,
Well,
so gambling, I believe, that's only going to vertical infrastructure, so we'd see fewer projects.
and with that, we're out of time. So thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week on Capitol View.